We now begin the fourth and final chapter to the book Brotherhood of Darkness. The Final Secret. One wintry afternoon in February 1891, three men were engaged in earnest conversation in London. From that conversation were to flow consequences of the greatest importance to the British Empire and to the world as a whole. For these men were organizing a secret society that was, for more than 50 years, to be one of the most important forces in the formulation and execution of British imperial and foreign policy. At this point, we must return to Agatha Christie's story. When Monsieur Poirot completed questioning the passengers on the Orient Express, he was amazed to find that all of them had either known Daisy Armstrong or a member of her family, and all of them had a motive to kill Mr. Ratchet, aka Crossetti. The inspector also suspected they were all concealing what they knew about the crime. He wondered how he would solve the murder when there were so many suspects and so many clues. We face the same problem today. Many groups and organizations are working to establish a world government and a new world religion. The media is lying to us. Conservative organizations are deceiving us, and our political leaders are doing everything possible to keep us from learning the identity of our enemy. Professor Carroll Quigley died in 1976, and to my knowledge, no one had tried to validate his research. In 1980, I decided to find out how he knew about Cecil Rhodes' secret society, since there were no references or footnotes in his book. I contacted the history department at Georgetown University, where Professor Quigley taught, and I was told that his papers had been donated to their library. I closed my medical practice, traveled to Washington, D.C., and began reading through thousands of pages of notes, correspondence, and unfinished manuscripts. I found what I was looking for among his letters. Professor Quigley went to England shortly after World War II ended, and while there he met Sir Alfred Zimmern. Sir Alfred taught international relations at Oxford University, and since both men were historians and shared similar interests, they soon became friends. Eventually, Sir Alfred told Professor Quigley about Cecil Rhodes' secret society. The members of the organization called it the group, or the band, or simply us. Sir Alfred joined the movement in 1910 and remained within the inner circle of the group until 1922, when he stopped attending meetings because he disagreed with their plan to support Germany. He was also concerned because they supported Adolf Hitler during the years that led up to World War II. Sir Alfred asked Professor Quigley not to reveal his source of information, although he had no objection to him writing about the secret society. Based on what he learned from Sir Alfred and 10 years of his own research, Professor Quigley eventually wrote a book entitled The Anglo-American Establishment, but he couldn't get it published. Why? Because even back in the 1950s, most of our publishing houses were controlled by the Eastern establishment. In those days, there were only a few conservative publishers, and since Professor Quigley detested conservatives, he didn't contact them. His manuscript languished among his papers until 4 years after his death, when an obscure publisher got permission to print it. The information I learned from studying Professor Quigley's papers and reading his second book, The Anglo-American Establishment, helped me understand part of the story of Cecil Rhodes' secret society. But there was much more. Professor Quigley wrote, "I have been told that the story I relate here would be better left untold. since it would provide ammunition for the enemies of what I admire. I do not share this view. The last thing I should wish is that anything I write could be used by the Anglophobes and isolationists of the Chicago Tribune. But I feel that the truth has a right to be told, and once told can be an injury to no men of goodwill. Professor Quigley was right. The truth must be told, and we are indebted to him for his years of diligent research. He continued, "It would have been very difficult to write this book if I had not received a certain amount of assistance of a personal nature from persons close to the group. For obvious reasons I cannot reveal the names of such persons." Later he wrote, "Sir Alfred Zimmern, for example, while always close to the group, was in its inner circle for a brief period in 1910 to 1922, thereafter slowly drifting away into the outer orbits of the group." Professor Quigley described the formation of Cecil Rhodes' secret society. One wintry afternoon in February 1891, three men were engaged in earnest conversation in London. From that conversation were to flow consequences of the greatest importance to the British Empire and to the world as a whole. For these men were organizing a secret society that was, for more than 50 years, to be one of the most important forces in the formulation and execution of British imperial and foreign policy. The Rhodes Scholarships, established by the terms of Cecil Rhodes' seventh will, are known to everyone. What is not so widely known is that Rhodes, in 5 previous wills, left his fortune to form a secret society, which was to devote itself to the preservation and expansion of the British Empire. And what does not seem to be known to anyone is that this secret society was created by Rhodes and his principal trustee, Lord Milner, and continues to exist to this day. Sir Alfred was not Professor Quigley's only source of information. There were many others. I have listed 4 of them below as 1, 2, 3, and 4. I discovered 3 additional sources which are listed as 5, 6, and 7. Number 1. William T. Stead was a member of Cecil Rhodes' secret society, but he was expelled because he exposed the Boer War. Some years later he wrote about the society in the last will and testament of Cecil John Rhodes. That was the book I showed you. And in an article in Review of Reviews and in his diary, Frederick Wright wrote a biography of William T. Stead based on his diary, and I showed you one of the volumes of that as well. The following quotation is taken from that biography. There we learn that Rhodes visited Stead in February 1891, and the talk concentrated presently upon the secret society, the Society of the Elect. Rhodes liked that word, who were to bind themselves to work for the British Empire in the way in which the Jesuits worked for the Church of Rome. I telegraphed for Brett, who came 2 hours later, and we had a long talk. The net upshot of which was the ideal arrangement would be, so far as we could see at present, Rhodes, General of the Society, Stead, Brett, Milner, to be the junta of 3. After Rhodes, Stead to be General, with a 3rd, who might be Rothschild in succession, behind them, manning the booths, Little Johnston, Albert Gray, Arthur Balfour, to constitute a circle of initiates. I'm sure you have all heard of Arthur Balfour. The fact that Arthur Balfour was chosen to become a member of the Circle of Initiates is important. You will learn more about him as our story progresses. 11 years later, in 1902, Arthur Balfour became the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And I will end this right here. That was video number 1 of the 4th and final chapter of Brotherhood of Darkness. And I will see you in video number 2.